Howdy, and welcome to the Breakaway podcast. Thanks for listening. Breakaway is a Bible study recorded on the campus of Texas A&M. For more information, visit breakawayministries.org. We hope you enjoy the message.
Well, I remember the first time I ever stepped into Kyle Field. I was a freshman, but I hadn't been raised in Aggie, so I didn't know a whole lot about A&M. So as we were walking towards Kyle Field, right around midnight on a Friday night, I was peppering my upperclassmen roommates about what we were doing. It's like, the game's not till tomorrow. Why are we all walking in here? Why are thousands of us loading up into Kyle Field the night before? And they were telling me, well, Ben, this is called midnight yell. They're like, this is where we practice the yells. We're all gonna yell together tomorrow at the football game. And I was like, don't those just kind of come naturally? I always felt like that was sort of a spontaneous experience. And they said, no, not at A&M. We yell the same words in unison to frustrate and scare our opponents. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that has a logic to it. And they're like, so we're gonna practice. I said, okay. And they're like, so we're gonna practice for a few minutes. And then after a while, we're gonna turn out the lights and you're gonna make out with the person that you brought. And I was like, wait, what? They're like, yeah, you're gonna kiss the person that you brought, which for me was like a sudden strange left turn in the conversation. I was like, what does that have to do with football? It's like, yeah, you're gonna kiss the person, or if you didn't bring somebody, no problem, you just hold up a lighter and someone will find you and you make out with them. And I started laughing, I was like, and then I realized they weren't joking. And I was like, oh my God, like this is an introvert's nightmare. Like I didn't bring somebody, and so everyone's gonna start kissing, and I'm gonna be the one guy by himself, and I'm gonna be like, how's that going over there? And like feel like a psycho. I was like, and I don't wanna be that. And then the fear struck me, but what if somebody does find me? And I don't wanna kiss them. And they come up to me, do I just start going, it's very, you don't want, or do I hit the ground? Or do I just extinguish the light and be like, not today, right? Or like, what do I do? And I just realized I'm not ready for this. And so I just stared at my feet for a few minutes until it was over. But I remember as I was looking at my toes, it struck me as fascinating how something as simple as the flip of a switch could produce such a variety of intense emotional responses across the stadium. And I mention that because I found lately that the exact same thing happens in rooms like this when I say, let's talk about dating. I've said it in front of rooms like this, where when I say that sentence, let's talk about dating, people start cheering your age. I've said the same sentence to people in Dallas, 25 and older, and they groaned audibly. And you go, why? Why the disparate responses? Because for some of them, man, the whole idea of bringing up dating just brings up anxiety because nobody knows the rules anymore. Like back in the day, there may have been problems with dating, but at least there was a script you'd follow. If a guy was interested in a girl, he would come a-calling and knock on her door and sit in the parlor with her and her parents and play the piano, sing some tunes, right? Now you're like, what do we do? You're like, am I supposed to text her? Is that too informal? Am I supposed to ask her in person on a date? Is that too old school? Am I supposed to just stalk her on Facebook a bunch? Is that creepy? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I talk to young people all the time that just the whole idea of, man, meeting somebody, falling in love, the words that come out are words about anxiety and stress, about something that's supposed to be joyful and fun. And yet for other people, when I say let's talk about dating, they get anticipation, right? Because they love talking about this. It's their favorite subject. Because when I say let's talk about dating, they just interdigitate with the person next to them, say, he's talking about us, baby. He's talking about our love. I hope it's a 7-part series, right? Because you know the thrill of liking somebody and having them like you back, right? For other people, it brings up agony. There's a lot of pain. So I remember for me, when I became director of Breakaway, like a decade later, I'm standing in the same Kyle Field, and I did a sermon on the toxic nature of secrets, how they steal your joy. And some of you know what that's like. Some of you don't sing in here very much because like David said, man, that secret sin in your life is sapping your joy like the heat of summer. And there's a shame that's burdening you. And so we were talking about that and saying, hey, the remedy for that is confession. James said, confess your sins one to another that you might be healed. You want redemption from that, you need to confess. And so you need to find a trusted person to process this with. But maybe as a beginning, you can come and we gave them all slips of paper. You can write down that thing you've never told anybody that's burdening you, and you can drop them in these trash cans. And we put them down on the field. Thousands of students here at A&M came forward and dropped these little pieces of paper in the bucket. And I remember I had just told the staff this week, I'm over talking about dating. I don't want to talk about dating. I've taught every passage about dating. I'm sick with it. But then I got all those little pieces of paper and I read every single one. And 4 out of 5 were about the desperate heartbreak of a relationship that went wrong. About that I had given all of myself to somebody that didn't love me back. That I betrayed a trust and I can't fix it. And I sat there in this mountain of pain. And let me tell you something, as somebody who's had the privilege of journeying among you over the years, I found that nobody cries like the brokenhearted. It's a tragic thing. And the sad thing for me is as I look at across the world at dating today, it's not a great place. Right now in America, for the first time in history, the average age of a woman's first child is younger than the average age of her first marriage. That's a devastating trend when you think about a child growing up without a father in the home. And some of you know what that's like. And you're not doomed if you're from a single parent house. I'm from one. A lot of great people I know are. That doesn't doom you. But all of you, many of you know the pain of growing up without the love of a parent in your world. That's difficult. And you look around at the world today and there's an increase in self-reported loneliness among your generation that most of you want to get married, most of you will get married, but you're taking longer than any other generation in recorded history. And some of those reasons are bad, but some of them are very painful. And I've just found that I've been swimming through a sea of hurt. And as someone who loves you, I want better for you. That love and romance should be associated with words like joy, not words like pain and sorrow and anxiety. And here's the good news tonight. Wherever you land in the tumultuous seas of life and love, the good news is there are fixed realities we can chart our course by wherever you might be in the sea. So Steve Callahan was a guy that was stranded in a little rubber life raft for 76 days in the middle of the Atlantic. He was emaciated, dazed, starving to death, but he took 3 little pencils and lashed them together and created a sextant. That's a navigational tool you can use to get your bearings by measuring the distance between the sun and the horizon. And it was his understanding of these fixed realities about the universe that helped him discover what latitudinal line he was on the globe, paddled safely into the right current, and then floated into the Caribbean and wrote a best-selling book. And so he's doing fine, right? Now, why mention that to you? Because it was his understanding of fixed realities about the universe that helped him navigate well. And that's the same with us. That though the processes of meeting people might change through generations, there's fixed principles about who God is and who you and I are, that if we can get our gaze on those, we can navigate the seas of relationship, whatever they might bring. And the North Star we're meant to all key off of in our life is this, that you must get a relationship with God right before you will ever get a relationship with a guy or a girl right. We must get a relationship with God right before you will ever get a relationship with a guy or girl right. Because Colossians 1 says all things are made by God and for God. You're made for him. And Augustine said our hearts are restless until they find their rest in him. You will never be at peace until you're linked up with your maker. And yet so many people go to a relationship with a guy or a girl to find some insecurities assuaged, some holes filled up, some love brought in. But here's the reality. You will never be a source of love if you don't have a source of love. You'll never be a source of life if you don't have a source of life. So I had a friend several years ago, did one of those crazy unsafe deals where you go scuba diving but don't take any lessons. You just go in the Caribbean and they kind of give you gear and like, here's basically how it works, and then just shove you in the ocean, right? So she did that, and they gave her all the gear, and they give you a swim buddy that the idea is you just kind of swim through the ocean together, and you have a buddy so you can point at fish and whatnot. And so they gave her this middle-aged guy, and the two of them are swimming along and it's going fine. But then all of a sudden something goes wrong with his air. Oxygen quits flowing. And they had taught them in that moment a series of hand signals to let them know you're in distress, and then you share your respirator and float safely to the surface. And yet for him, when scarcity hit, desperation set in. And so he grabbed her and began to shake her. And then he grabbed the respirator out of her mouth and put it in his mouth. And she was confused, like none of this was what they told us on the shore. And she's trying to understand what he's doing. And then he starts to try to climb her like a ladder to get to the top, which doesn't make sense. He's just drowning her, right? So finally she has to start punching him, right? To get him to loosen up. And they're fighting for air. And so in an act of desperation, he just grabs her, swims full speed to the top, doesn't adjust for depth. They get a squeeze, they get the bends, they get sick, right? And so needless to say, they're not swim buddies anymore. Or any kind of buddies, for that matter. You go, what happened? Well, there was scarcity, there was desperation. And where there's desperation, there's exploitation, right? And that's where so many dating relationships go wrong. We go to a guy or a girl to give us what only God can. We go to them to feel secure, them to feel alive, them to feel whole. We go to a person to meet our needs that they can't possibly meet. And so the reality is we go to them to be a source of life, and we become suckers of life rather than a source of life. But if you want to really have a healthy relationship, you must get a relationship with God right before you'll ever get a relationship with a guy or a girl right. Because John says it in 1 John 4. He says, beloved, let us love one another. Command to love. And then he says for, which indicates a reason. Let me give you a reason why. Let us love one another. Why, John? And you would think he'd point downstream, either to a positive motivation or a threat. Love one another. Why, John? Because if you love one another, God will bless you. Or love one another. Why, John? Because if you don't, God will beat you, right? But he doesn't point downstream. He says, love one another. Why, John? Because love is from God. And everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. He points upstream. You want to be a great lover of people? You need to know the love of God. Love embraced becomes love extended. That's how it works. Beloved, let us love. Why? Because love's from God. It's the most natural thing to love other people when you know you're loved by an inexhaustible source. And when you have that source of life, you can be a source of life. So when Jesus met with the woman at the well, they were talking about her life, and he said, go call your husband. What'd she say? I don't have a husband. He said, yeah, you've had 5, and now you're living with a guy that won't marry you. And rather than shame her about her poor choices or give her a talk of the 7 happy steps to a beautiful marriage, what does he do? He starts talking about himself. He said, if you knew who you were talking to, you'd ask me, and I would give you the water that would not only satisfy your thirst, but would be a well of water coming out of you. He said, you've misdiagnosed your need. You're going to a guy to give you what only God can. You come to me, the source of life, and I will be a source of life that you can then bring into these relationships you're in, because in this, the love of God was manifest. God sent his son for us. Love sent for us in the Son of God. He sacrificed for us the propitiation for our sins. When you see Jesus came running for you, when you see Jesus took on your shame, your burden, your guilt, buried it in the grave, when you see that incredible love, then you'll know you're loved and you can be a source of love to others. We must get that relationship right, and then we'll have a source for others. The latest U.S. naval destroyer is called the USS Michael Monsoor, named after a Navy SEAL who was tasked with his team of driving insurgents out of Ramadi in 2006. While on a rooftop with his men, they lobbed a grenade onto the roof, an insurgent. Michael Monsoor, without hesitation, dove on the grenade, absorbing the blast. In doing so, it cost his life, but it saved all of his men. Let me ask you a question. Do you think those men wonder if they're loved? Do you think they wonder if Michael loved them? They know for a fact he did, because greater love has no man than this, than he give his life for his friends. Do you ache to feel loved? Look to the cross. Jesus Christ came for you, sacrificed for you, so that you might live. This is the great love we must have first. What's the greatest commandment? Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then love one another as yourself. It starts there. And then I love what the Apostle Paul does. He says, when I get that, he says, I haven't obtained this. I haven't become perfect. But one thing I do, I press on to make him my own because he made me his own. He says, that's the great pursuit. He says, Christ came to get me, and so now I run to get him. That's the rest of my life. And the beautiful thing is, that's what singleness is for. Paul will tell the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 7, he says, I wish all of you were single as I am. However, each man has his own gift from God, one in this manner, one in that. He calls singleness a gift. And yet many people see it as a burden to be discharged and a barrier to be overcome. He sees singleness as a gift. Why? He says, I say this for your own benefit, not to put a restraint on you, but to promote what is appropriate and to secure an undistracted devotion to the Lord. He says, the big narrative in the universe is that God came for me, and the big North Star for me is that I chase him. And then God has given every human being on the planet a season of singleness. And that season has a purpose, not to pursue distractions, but to pursue an undistracted devotion to the Lord. Let me chase the one who chased me. And God has given me a season of singleness. Why? So I can get that number one relationship right. Because here's the reality. Dating is great, but it's distracting. Some of you, as the band was leading us in worship, you were worshiping alone. As I prayed, you prayed along with me. As I've been preaching, you've listened attentively, right? Others of you are here with somebody cute, maybe somebody that has some potential, right? And the whole time the band was leading worship, you were going, I wonder what I should do with my arms right now. Like, do I want to show them I'm into it? Or like maybe not that into it, maybe a little into it? Or maybe do I just hedge my bets like I'm into it, but not too much? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I do this, right? While we were praying, you were sitting there going, are our arms touching? Did his arm just touch my arm? What does that mean, all right? You're kind of gazing down to see if his shoes are cool or, sensible, right? And while I've been preaching, you've been thoroughly distracted, right? That's why the Puritans back in the day used to separate the guys and girls in services like this. Because if you've ever tried to listen to a sermon, she knows what I'm talking about. You ever tried to listen to a sermon next to somebody who smells fantastic? It's not easy. It's a hard thing. And so God has given you a gift, and that gift is to be without distractions, not to fill your life with distraction, but to pursue an undistracted devotion to him. And marriage is filled with anxieties, Paul will say. There's all kinds of anxieties that come on with marriage. It's a burden that's great, but it's difficult. I bear that burden. I feel that burden. I love my wife, but I was talking the other day with a staff person, and she said, have you ever seen this TV show? I said, no. She said, have you seen this show? No. Have you seen this one? No. Have you seen this one? No. And she said, how have you not seen these shows? And I said, I have 3 children under the age of 5. I said, I have 30 minutes of discretionary time each day with which to do what I choose. And I remember when I said that to her, a single girl, she went, I have 6 hours. And I said, I know. I said, I've been there. And now I'm here. And I'm so tired all the time. Now, do I love my wife? Yes. Do I love my kids? Yes. I'm not a victim. And yet the reality is there's a lot of encumbrances that come with this. There just are. And yet there's a tendency in every human being to amplify the benefits of another stage and minimize the benefits of their own. And I don't want you to do that. There are great benefits to marriage, but you have a benefit right now as a single person of freedom and time. Children are not as free as you, and the elderly are not as free as you. God has given you this moment, not to fill it with distraction and not to pursue naked ambition, but to pursue an undistracted devotion to the Lord. That's a gift he's given you. You're meant to use. The average young person today, by the time they turn age 21, spends 10,000 hours playing video games. Takes less than half of that to earn your bachelor's degree. Here's the thing, man. I don't care if you play video games. I really don't care. But if it's a major part of your life, let me beg you something, young man. Don't just say fantasy worlds while the real world's on fire. Don't just say fantasy worlds while the real world's on fire. We're in the midst of the greatest humanitarian crisis right now on our planet since World War II. And I know many of you know about it because TA has aimed you at it. But I have been going to room around the country, and so many young people don't even know what I'm talking about. It's our moment in history. The world's hemorrhaging in pain. And you have a moment where you can do something about it. Look at Houston. I called a friend down there in Houston and asking him, how are things going? He's like, my neighborhood's an island. It's flooded all around us. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm staying at home. I got little kids and I'm just hunkered down at home. It's the single people that were hopping in boats saving people. Both worthwhile, but you have an opportunity as a single person to go make a difference in Houston right now, to go make a difference in the world right now. Don't use this singleness to pursue distraction. Don't just follow other people's lives on a screen and miss out on living your own. The average young person spends 9 hours a day looking at a screen. And I'm not shaming you for that. You didn't create these. They were handed to you when you were babies. And I don't care if you use them. Who doesn't use a phone? But the reality is you got to ask yourself the question, do I want it to be true of me that the vast majority of my waking hours are spent on a screen? Or when I hit the end of my singleness, do I want to look up and say, I leveraged it for the things that matter most? It's meant for a purpose, to pursue an undistracted devotion to him. That word devotion is a combination of the word good and beside. I'm begging you in college, get really good at being close beside the Lord. For me, my dating relationships in college were a dumpster fire, maybe is the best metaphor. And I realized it's because I didn't know what I was doing. It wasn't the girl's fault. It was me. It's not you. It's me, right? That's what it was, and that was true, right? I remember one of them that I never actually dated, but we broke up, which you're like, how does that work? It's a long story, with a lot of tears. But I remember as we were breaking up, she said, you really need to go to counseling. And I was like, I know, right? And so I just had to stop confusing women. And some of you, that's the only thing you need to hear tonight. And I realized I'm not getting we right because I'm not getting me right. And I thought, I just need to get the first thing first. I need to know God. And I started to write out books of the Bible. I used to take walks with God at night praying. I fell in love with him in my college years here on the campus. And I want that for you. Be good at sitting by his word and be good at joining his work. Be a part of the solution in places like Houston. Leverage your life for what matters most. And yet some of you hear that and you go, well, Ben, if all I'm doing is chasing the Lord and just pursuing the Lord, Paul uses running imagery of I'm pursuing the one that pursued me. If that's what my life's about, how am I ever going to meet somebody? Well, Paul told young Timothy, flee youthful lust, pursue righteousness, love, joy, and peace, along with those who call out to God out of pure heart. He says you run away from youthful lusts, you pursue righteous things, and what will happen? There'll be all kinds of cute people going different directions in life. Don't worry about them. You chase after the main thing and you will look left and right and there will be people who want him as much as you do running alongside of them. And some of them will become your mentors. Some of them will become your best friends and some of them will be cute. And as you chase after him and they do too, you just kind of start running closer. What's up, baby girl? And then you get married, right? That's how it works. It's funny, there was a pop song when I was young that came out and the girl sang, it was supposed to be a romantic song, her and her boyfriend running away. She's like, so we're running just as fast as we can, holding on to one another's hand, trying to get away into the night. And then you put your arms around me and we tumble to the ground and then we say, I think we're alone now. And it's supposed to be this romantic song, like we finally got away and we're alone. But every time I would hear it, I'm like, that is the dumbest imagery. Like you're running, and at some point he just turns and wraps you up and y'all hit the ground. I'm like, that's not romantic. He just form tackled you. Like in real life, it'd be like, what are you, right? But that's what so many of us do. And I've watched it so often with young people. They're pursuing the things of God and then they meet somebody and they get totally distracted from that pursuit, wrap this person up and their spiritual and emotional life nosedives. And I've watched so many young men and young women lose a pursuit of God and lose the light in their eyes, honestly. And they get shamed because they know they're violating their integrity with what they're doing sexually. They begin to pair off and distance from their friends, and they're fighting and just struggling, and you see a relationship that's not life-giving, it's life-sucking. And I see so many people that they lose this pursuit for this one, and it's not meant to be that way. Dating is an evaluation. It's not a status to sit in, it's a process to move through where you're discerning, is this the person that I'm supposed to link hands with and run with? And the number one concern you need to figure out is, do they have the same cause? The longest chapter in the book of Genesis is Genesis 24, and it's about marriage. And I hope you hear in that tonight that God cares about your dating life. He cares about your love life. He is not callous to your longings. Longer than the chapter about creation or about sin or about civilization is the chapter about marriage. And you see Abraham as he charges his servant to find a wife for his son. He warns him, he says, whatever you do, you will not take for my son a wife from among the daughters of the Canaanites, but go to my people in the old country. And you go, why doesn't he want him to marry a Canaanite? Is he a racist? It's not about race, it's about allegiance. That the Canaanites had no vision for God, and they had a sensual and violent culture. And he said, I will not let my son compromise. He said, we are out here on the cutting edge of faith, pursuing a God that's gonna bless us to bless the world, and my son will not settle. You need to find someone who's running after the same cause and will not settle. I am chasing the things of God, and I won't compromise. So that means a lot of cute, charming people will run by you, but charm is deceptive. It can be faked. Anyone can lie over a dinner. And beauty is vain, it fades. But a man or a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. You find someone running after the same cause. And what I love about that is Abraham will send his servant, and he will walk 500 miles to find the right wife for this man, right? And so if you go, well, there's no good guys in my social circle, move! He walked 500 miles. And you may need to do that, and you may need to walk 500 more just to be the man who walks 1,000 miles to fall down at her shore. That's Genesis 24. And then when the servant gets to the hometown, he says, I went out to the well at the time the women are working. He says, I want to see someone who's working to serve her community. And then he prays, God, let her be one that's not just working hard, but that when she sees I need help, she's gracious. The Bible says of God that he's strong and loving, and you want someone who is chasing the same cause as you and is shaped by God's character. That they're strong, working with their hands for the good of the community. I used to pray for God, I do not want to meet my wife at a singles thing. I want to meet her on the mission field. I want to meet a girl that's doing stuff. And when I met Donna, she was leading worship and serving and mentoring young girls and training them up and pouring into young girls in high school and junior high. And I said, that's the kind of person I want to marry, someone who is charging out in life, living so that we can run together. And that's what you want. Don't settle for less than that. And you want someone, man, where they have the same cause and they have a God-shaped character. You see it in Song of Solomon, the book of love, that the woman's excited about this man, and it's good to be excited. She declares at the very beginning, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. She says, I want his mouth on my mouth. But then when you see why she's so excited, she says his name is like oil poured out. This sweet fragrance is coming from his name. What does that mean? His character. That he's kind, that he has a good reputation, that the men around him are better because of his presence. Ladies, don't settle for a guy who's less than that. His looks will fade. His charm is deceptive. Watch his social circle. Are they better because of his presence, or are they worse? Don't unite yourself with somebody who doesn't have a God-shaped character. And men, same with you. Proverbs will say it's better to live on the corner of a roof than in a house with a contentious woman. That's not written to married men. It's not written to a married guy on the corner of his roof going, now you tell me. It's written to single men and say, watch her. Is she always in some kind of feud? Is she cruel in the way she does social media and talks about people? Then you won't have peace in your home. You find godly character. And then all that you have to look for next is chemistry. Do we get along? In the Song of Solomon, he calls her my halup, my best friend. And that's what you want. That's why it's so important to hold sex off until marriage, which is a whole nother sermon. But sex fires your dopamine chemicals, happy chemicals that reinforces behavior. I should do that again. And it fires oxytocin, the bonding agent in your body. Same chemical released when a mother breastfeeds a child. That's why there's no such thing as casual sex. That your body fires dopamine, repeat this behavior, and oxytocin, and bond to whatever is giving you this feeling. And why it's dangerous to introduce sex into dating, just for one reason, is because dating's for evaluation. Are we meant to run together in life? And if you introduce sexuality too early, you will bond yourself to this person and want more of them. And it's not until 5, 6, 7 years later into the marriage you look up and go, I don't really like him that much. Because I got news for you. Most of marriage is not sex. Most of marriage is just kind of hanging out. And I've met people and I've wept with people that they got caught up in the charm and the beauty and they got all stirred up because it felt so good. And then they looked and said, we don't have anything in common and our lives are going different directions. What do they mean by that? They don't mean, well, he's a plumber and I'm a librarian. It's not about career. They mean in the biggest course determining factors in life, your vision determines your goals determine your decisions. You get someone who's chasing God and shaped by God, and you have a chemistry as a friend. And then, man, you hold off on sexuality, and that's not to shame you. Everyone in here has in some way been devastated sexually in this culture today. So there's no shame here tonight. Jesus didn't marry a pristine bride in the church. None of us came in clean. And I hope nobody leaves here feeling shamed or beat up, but you can know tonight you got forgiveness. But the reality is it's good for us in evaluating to hold that back. Why? Because we're trying to see, is this the person I'm meant to link hands and run to get? Because engagement is a merger, it's a union. Uniting our lives. Can we communicate about deep things? Can they talk to me about the deepest things in life? Can we work through issues? Do the words of the wise bring healing, or are his harsh words like the thrust of a sword? In an engagement, you're uniting yourselves and seeing, can we communicate about the deepest things in life? Because ultimately, marriage is about mission. I link hands and we run together into whatever God has for us. For me, with Donna, that took a while. I wasn't sure how I felt. And yet, as we began to meet each other, we got community around us, people to surround us and help us evaluate this relationship. Is it healthy? And man, we began to pray. And the more I watched her life, I saw that, man, she wasn't perfect, but she was perfectible. She was a woman before God that wanted to know him, and her allegiance to God was constantly making her better. And I thought, that's a safe person to trust my heart with. And she watched in me. I was far from perfect, but I was pursuing. And the more I pursued him, God was shaping my character. And I was a man worthy of her affections because she could trust me. I didn't just want the parts of her I could use. I wanted all of her. And as we got to know each other, we realized we're pursuing the same cause. We're being shaped by God's character, and there's a chemistry. We get along. And so we decided to run into the future together. And I want that for you because a marriage is ultimately meant to be a picture of Christ's love for his church and a pursuit of Christ's mission in the world. I read a book recently about ancient Rome. Why in ancient Rome a thoroughly sexual, yes, but a thoroughly secular culture. Why did people convert to Christianity? Why put their faith in Jesus? The tribe of Jesus was small, and to join it would at least cost you your job, definitely cost you socially, maybe cost you your life. Why would you join that club? What club could pitch you that and you go, I'm in? And so I was just wondering, how did that happen? Because the church grew and outgrew Rome. How did that happen? You know, one of the main ways it happened is because in Rome, all the boundaries to sexuality were dropped to the floor. And when there's no sexual boundaries, women lose and children lose, and ultimately men lose because they get dehumanized. And you saw in the midst of this culture, everyone was hurting each other romantically and relationally and sexually, except the Christians. And you can read ancient documents about early Romans saying their sexual ethic is backward, it's regressive, it's weird, and it's beautiful. And the women feel honored, and the men feel respected and cherished, and their children are happy. What is making you this way? And what's making them this way is they're a marriage on mission, linking hands and pursuing the God who made them, loving him and loving each other. You will be a beacon of love to the world. When you have that source, you'll be a source. And that's what I want for you in marriage. So last story. Back in the day, when you were sailing a ship across the ocean, you would hit moments as a captain where you would look and go, I don't know what's underneath the surface of the water. Especially as you're getting near the shore, you're like, this is dangerous ground. Like there could be shoal under there that would rip the bottom of our boat. There could be a sandbar I get stuck on and the waves rip my boat apart. There could be rocks that I crash into as I attempt to dock. There were many moments where a captain would look and say, my ship is in a dangerous place and I don't know the best way forward. And as a captain, you had an option. You could just say, well, I'm the captain of this ship and I'm the captain of my own soul. I'm gonna do whatever I want and risk the death of you and your crew. Or in humility, you could say, I don't know the best way. I can't navigate these waters alone. And in that moment, when that struck them, I need help, they would fly a flag. And the colors on that flag declared to everyone on the coastline and the ships around them, I need a pilot. A pilot was somebody who knew that area like the back of their hand. And a pilot would be living maybe on that coastline, would see that ship, see that flag, and they would hop in their little coracle and row out and get on the boat and take the wheel and lead them safely home. And the captain, to make sure that all the other pilots knew, I'm okay, and all the other ships knew, this ship is safe, you don't gotta worry about us, they would fly a different flag, red and white, that declared to the world, I have a pilot. I have a pilot that in these tempestuous seas, he's leading me safely home. And they used to sing a song back then. Jesus, Savior, pilot me over life's tempestuous seas. Wondrous sovereign of the sea, Jesus, Savior, pilot me. And so I don't know where you are relationally tonight, but I know that God loves you. And he so loved the world that he sent his son, that whoever believes in him wouldn't perish but would have life. And wherever you are in this room tonight, you can look and say, I don't know how to navigate relationships. Maybe you're like me in college where you're like, Ben, I'm making a wreck of them. Maybe you're single and longing. Maybe you're looking and going, I've made a mess and I'm hurting. Maybe you're out here and go, I don't know what I'm doing in life. But we have a God who came for us, sacrificed for us, and is offering to save and to guide us safely home. So you put your trust in him, and it's the safest place. The wondrous sovereign of these seas, Jesus, our Savior, can pilot you. Trust him with your life, with your love, and I promise you, he'll lead you safely home.